They say family secrets never really stay buried. But that night, as we sat around the mahogany table under the crystal chandelier, I could feel the weight of every hidden truth pressing down on my shoulders. It wasn't just the polite laughter or the clinking of silverware that set me on edge. It was the way no one looked me in the eye for too long, and the way they kept their voices low as if the walls themselves were listening. I'm Harper Grant, and this was supposed to be a celebration, a toast to my late father's life and his so-called legacy. But the air felt thick and sour, and something deep inside me knew there was more to this evening than stale wine and forced smiles. The hook came in the form of a single phrase. My cousin Lucas leaned across the table, his voice a hushed whisper as he said, "She's been hiding things from you, Harper. Things you'd want to see." I stiffened my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a breath. But Lucas only shook his head. His lips pressed into a thin line and turned away as if he'd said too much already. That was the moment I knew. The moment the question slammed into my chest and refused to let go. What was she hiding? And why had everyone decided to keep me in the dark? I scanned the table. My stepmother Evelyn sat at the far end, her smile as polished as the pearls around her neck. Her fingers drummed an idle rhythm on her wineglass, and when her eyes met mine, there was something there, something cold, a flicker of challenge or warning, I couldn't be sure. "Is everything all right, Harper?" she asked sweetly, her tone dripping honey. It made me want to shiver. I forced a small smile. Of course I lied. My mind was already spinning. Evelyn had always been a master of appearances. But tonight, she was trying too hard to look unbothered, too calm, in the face of Lucas's cryptic warning. The dinner continued course after course of gourmet dishes that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. My thoughts were elsewhere, on the flicker of unease in Lucas's eyes, on the way Evelyn's laughter seemed too light, too carefully rehearsed. Halfway through dessert, I noticed it. A small tear in the corner of the tablecloth, just big enough to reveal the edge of a pale envelope underneath. My pulse quickened as I watched Evelyn's hand slide casually over it, tucking the envelope out of sight with a flick of her wrist. No one else seemed to notice, or if they did, they pretended not to. The envelope was thick cream-colored, the kind my father had always used for important documents. My father, who'd spent his final years obsessed with putting things in order, as he liked to say. My father, whose will had already been read, but whose secrets apparently were still very much alive. I caught Evelyn's eye across the table. She smiled, but her knuckles were white around her fork. My mind raced. What could be in that envelope, and why was she so desperate to keep it hidden? After dinner, I slipped away from the table, making my way down the long, dim hallway, lined with portraits of ancestors whose stern gazes seemed to follow me. My father's study was at the end of that hallway, a room that had always felt like his alone dark wood shelves, the faint scent of pipe smoke clinging to the air. I pushed the door open, half expecting to see Evelyn there already. But the room was empty, the only light coming from the moon spilling through the tall windows. My father's old leather chair sat behind the massive desk, the surface polished to a mirror shine. I stepped inside, my heart hammering. If there was any truth to Lucas's warning, it would start here. I ran my fingers over the edge of the desk, feeling for anything out of place, any hidden drawer or false panel. My father had been meticulous, almost paranoid about his privacy. I remembered him once telling me, "Never assume the truth will come looking for you. Sometimes you have to go digging." Those words echoed in my head, now fueling my determination. A sound behind me made me spin around. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her face calm, but her eyes sharp as glass. "Looking for something, Harper?" she asked lightly, stepping into the room as if she owned it. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just remembering Dad," I said. This was his favorite room. She nodded, her expression softening, just enough to almost be convincing. "Yes. He spent so many hours here. But some things are better left in the past. Don't you think?" I didn't answer. My gaze dropped to her hand, where she held the envelope I'd seen her hide at dinner. She noticed my stare and slipped it into her purse with a smooth, practiced motion. I should be going, she said, her voice sweet as ever. You know how these family dinners tire me out. I watched her leave my mind a storm of questions. She was hiding something. I was sure of it. And if she thought I'd just let it go, she didn't know me as well as she thought. As the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a shaky breath. My father had always believed the truth had a way of clawing its way out, no matter how deeply it was buried. I was ready to dig, ready to find whatever she was trying so hard to keep from me, because I knew in the pit of my stomach that this was no small family spat or harmless secret. This was bigger, something worth risking everything to protect. And that made me certain of one thing: I wouldn't stop until I found the truth. The house was quiet after the dinner, the kind of quiet that made the floorboards creak under every cautious step. I wandered down the hallway, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The words Lucas had whispered, "She's been hiding things from you," echoed in my head like a dare. I didn't know what those things were, but I knew I wasn't leaving tonight without some kind of answer. I found Lucas on the back patio, leaning against the railing with a cigarette between his fingers. The glow of the ember lit up his face in the dark shadows playing across his features. He looked up as I approached, a flash of something unreadable in his eyes. "You can't just say something like that and leave me hanging," I said, keeping my voice low. The night air was cool against my skin, the distant hum of the city beyond the property line filling the silence. He took a drag from the cigarette, exhaling slowly. "I shouldn't have said anything," he muttered. "But you deserve to know the truth, Harper." "Then tell me," I pressed. "What is Evelyn hiding?" Lucas hesitated, his brow furrowing. "It's not just Evelyn. It's the whole family. There's a reason no one talks about those documents. Your father, he was careful, but not everyone was loyal. And Evelyn, she's always been good at making things disappear." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What kind of documents are we talking about?" He stubbed out the cigarette and turned to face me fully. "Something about the house, the estate, maybe even more than that. Your dad didn't trust Evelyn, and he made sure to leave a paper trail. I don't know exactly what's in there, but I know it's important. And she's been keeping it from you." The weight of his words settled in my chest, heavy and cold. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because Evelyn has a way of dealing with people who ask too many questions," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're his daughter, Harper. If anyone has a right to know, it's you." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "Then I need to see those documents, whatever it takes." Lucas looked away, his jaw tight. "Be careful," he warned. "She's not someone you want to cross lightly." I left him there, the night air swirling around us like a promise. Back inside the house was a maze of dimly lit hallways and locked doors. I made my way to my father's study again, determined to find the clue I knew was there. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I stepped inside, heart pounding. My father's leather chair still faced the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. I remembered the way he used to sit there for hours, lost in thought, the scent of his cologne still faint in the air. I started with the desk. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood, searching for any sign of a false panel or hidden compartment. My father had always been a man of secrets, but he'd taught me to look beyond what was obvious. "The truth is always in the details," he used to say. I opened the drawers one by one, flipping through old receipts and yellowed pages that smelled like dust and memories. Nothing. My frustration grew with each empty drawer, but I refused to give up. A sudden memory flashed through my mind, my father's voice telling me about the hidden drawer he'd built himself. "For when the truth needs to be kept safe," he'd said. My pulse quickened as I felt along the back panel of the bottom drawer. My fingers found a small groove, almost invisible, and I pressed. With a soft click, a hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a thin, leather-bound journal and a single key on a brass ring. My breath caught in my throat. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, looping and elegant, the ink faded but clear. I opened the journal, scanning the first page. "If you're reading this, it means you've found the truth I couldn't trust to anyone else." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. The entries were dated in the final months of his life, each one more urgent than the last. He wrote about Evelyn, about how she'd manipulated her way into his life, about the things she'd hidden from the rest of the family, about documents that proved she'd taken more than her fair share, twisting his wishes to suit her own. The last entry was the shortest, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. The key is for the safe in the East Wing. Don't trust her, Harper. Find the truth. The East Wing. My father's old bedroom was there, sealed off after his passing, left untouched, like a museum of memories. Evelyn had always said it was too painful to disturb. Now I understood why. I tucked the journal under my arm and pocketed the key, my heart thundering in my chest. I needed to see that safe for myself. As I slipped back into the hallway, I nearly collided with Evelyn. She was standing there, her expression unreadable, her eyes flicking to the journal in my hands. "What are you doing in there?" she asked, her voice too calm. I forced a smile. "Just remembering Dad," I said, echoing her words from earlier. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You always were sentimental," she said lightly, but her gaze was sharp as a knife. "It's late. You should get some sleep." "I will," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. As she turned and walked away, I felt a chill in the pit of my stomach. Evelyn knew I was getting close. She wouldn't let me find the safe without a fight. I clutched the key tighter in my hand, the metal warm from my grip. My father had trusted me with this, even from beyond the grave. I wouldn't let his trust be for nothing. I knew the risks. I knew the danger. But the truth was worth it. And as I stood there in the dark, the echo of my father's voice in my ears, I made a silent promise I won't stop. Not until I find what she's hiding. Not until I know everything. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, the leather-bound journal open on my lap, the brass key warm in my hand. My father's words echoed in my head, stirring up memories I'd spent years trying to bury. The East Wing safe, the documents, the truth he'd wanted me to find. I waited until the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains before I moved. The house was still and silent, the kind of heavy quiet that made every floorboard's creak sound like a gunshot. I slipped out of my room, clutching the key like a lifeline, and made my way down the long hallway that led to the East Wing. The East Wing had always been off-limits after my father died. Evelyn said it was out of respect, but I knew better now. The heavy wooden door was locked, but the brass key slid in easily, the lock clicking open with a satisfying finality. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and old memories. The curtains were drawn, casting a space in a dim half-light. My father's desk sat in the center of the room, his favorite books lining the shelves behind it. I let my fingers drift over the spines of those books, feeling the ghosts of his presence in every worn leather cover. I didn't waste time. I crossed to the far wall, where I remembered the safe was hidden behind a framed painting of a windswept coastline. My father had loved that painting. He said it reminded him of the summers he spent by the sea years before I was born. I lifted it carefully off its hook, revealing the steel door embedded in the wall. The safe was old, but sturdy, the keyhole gleaming in the faint light. My hands were shaking as I slid the brass key into the lock and turned it. The bolt clicked back, and the door swung open with a slow, deliberate groan. Inside, stacks of yellowed papers and manila folders waited. Some were tied together with string, others loose and frayed at the edges. My breath caught in my throat as I reached for the first file, the weight of years of secrets heavy in my hands. I flipped through the pages quickly, at first legal documents, property deeds, handwritten letters in my father's careful script. But then, a single sheet of paper stopped me cold. It was a signed amendment to his will, dated only weeks before his death. It named me as the sole heir to the family estate, completely cutting Evelyn out. My stomach twisted. Evelyn had always said the will was straightforward, that my father had left everything to her to keep it simple. But here was the proof that she'd lied, proof that she'd stolen what was mine. A noise behind me made me spin around, clutching the papers to my chest. The door to the East Wing was still ajar, but I saw a shadow move just beyond it, a flicker of motion that sent my pulse racing. "Who's there?" I called, my voice low but firm. No answer. I took a step closer, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heart. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, then a voice soft and calm, like a blade sliding between my ribs. I see you've been busy, Harper. Evelyn stepped into the room, her expression as serene as ever, but her eyes glinting with something colder than fear. She looked down at the documents clutched in my hands and raised an eyebrow. Going through your father's things without asking, she said lightly. How very bold of you. I straightened my fingers, tightening around the will. You lied to me, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You told me he left everything to you, but he didn't. This says, she held up a hand, cutting me off. I know what it says, she said, her voice soft and infuriatingly calm. But you have to understand, Harper, this isn't about pieces of paper. This is about what's best for the family. I stared at her, the calm certainty in her voice, making my skin crawl. You stole from me, I said. You hid this. And what would you have done with it if you'd known? She asked, her tone almost gentle. Would you have fought me, taken me to court, torn this family apart, just to prove a point? I swallowed, my mouth dry. It's not about proving a point, I said. It's about the truth. My father trusted me. He wanted me to have this. She tilted her head, studying me, as if I were a puzzle she'd almost finished putting together. Your father was a good man, she said softly. But he didn't always make good decisions. He was sick, Harper, confused. I did what I had to do to protect what's left of this family. I felt like the room was tilting around me, her words wrapping around my throat. Protect it from what? From me. From chaos, she said simply. From secrets that would only hurt everyone. I shook my head, backing away from her. No, you're not doing this to protect anyone but yourself. Her expression hardened, the softness in her voice, vanishing like a mask slipping away. Think very carefully about your next steps, Harper, she said, her voice low and cold. You're stirring up things that should have been left buried. If you keep digging, you might not like what you find. I didn't answer. I turned away from her, clutching the documents to my chest, and stepped back into the hallway. My heart was pounding, my mind a blur of fear and fury. I didn't know exactly what Evelyn was capable of, but I knew one thing: I couldn't let her win. My father had trusted me with the truth, and I wouldn't let that trust be for nothing. As I made my way back to my room, the documents hidden in the folds of my jacket, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The game had changed. Evelyn had played her cards, and now it was my turn. I didn't know what I'd find next, or how far she'd go to keep her secrets safe. But I knew I wasn't alone. My father's voice was in my head, calm and steady, a promise that the truth was worth fighting for. And as I locked my door behind me, I whispered to myself, I'm not afraid of the truth, Evelyn. But you should be. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a storm of thoughts and questions, all tangled up with the same word over and over: why? Why would Evelyn go to such lengths to keep the truth hidden? What was she so afraid of me finding? The documents I'd taken from the safe felt like both a shield and a weapon. They were proof of what my father really wanted, and of how far Evelyn had gone to twist his wishes. But I knew that wasn't the end of it. The way she'd looked at me when she caught me in the East Wing. There was something else there. Something she was still hiding. I spent the early hours of the morning reading every line of those papers, committing them to memory. My father's signature, the changes he'd made, the quiet confidence in his words, they felt like a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. But each time I closed my eyes, I saw Evelyn's calm smile, her voice echoing in my mind. You're stirring up things that should have been left buried. I didn't want to believe she could be dangerous, but I also knew better than to underestimate her. When the sun finally rose, I dressed quickly and made my way downstairs. The house was quiet, the soft morning light turning the halls gold and gentle. But the calm was a lie. I could feel it, like the air itself was holding its breath. I found Evelyn in the kitchen, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her smile as perfect as ever. Morning, Harper, she said, her tone bright and warm. Did you sleep well? I ignored the question, stepping closer, so I could see the play of light and shadow on her face. We need to talk, I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of her coffee. About what? You know what I said. I pulled the will out of my jacket and laid it on the kitchen counter. This changes everything, Evelyn. She looked down at the papers, her smile never faltering. I see you've been busy, she said softly. I suppose I should have expected that. My hands curled into fists. You lied to me, I said, my voice shaking. You told me he left everything to you, that there was nothing else. But this says otherwise. Evelyn didn't flinch. She set her cup down carefully and folded her hands in front of her. Your father was a complicated man, she said calmly. He changed his mind often in those final months. I did what I thought was best for everyone. No, I said. You did what was best for you. You stole from me, from him. A flash of something anger-fear flickered in her eyes, but it was gone almost as soon as it appeared. You're being emotional, Harper, she said softly, almost pityingly. You don't understand how fragile these things can be. Families can break apart over less. I took a step closer, my voice low and fierce. Maybe they should. If this is what keeping a family together looks like, lies and manipulation, maybe it's better if it all falls apart. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and electric. Evelyn's eyes bored into mine, searching for something weakness doubt. I didn't give her any. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders relaxing. I see you're not going to let this go, she said. But you should know, Harper. There are consequences to digging up the past. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I held my ground. Are you threatening me? I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course not. I'm just warning you. For your own good. I picked up the papers and stepped back, my mind racing. I'm going to show these to a lawyer, I said. And if there's anything else you've been hiding, I'll find it. For the first time, I saw her mask slip. Her lips tightened, her eyes going cold. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice icy. Maybe, I said. But it's my mistake to make. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, the weight of her stare heavy on my back. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to breathe, to focus. I had the proof. I had the truth. And I wasn't going to let her take it from me. I didn't stop to think about what might happen next. I didn't let myself consider the possibility that she might be right, that I was tearing something apart that couldn't be put back together. All I knew was that I couldn't turn back now. I spent the rest of the day making copies of the will and the documents, scanning them to my laptop, and locking them in a fireproof box. I reached out to an attorney, a family friend. I trusted someone who wouldn't be swayed by Evelyn's charm. I set up a meeting for the next morning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, I sat by the window and watched the light fade. The house was quiet again, but it felt different this time. Like the silence wasn't just waiting, it was listening. I thought about my father, about the way he used to sit in his study, lost in his thoughts, always a step ahead of everyone else. I wondered if he'd known, even then, what Evelyn was capable of. If he'd known how far she'd go to keep her secrets. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Lucas standing there, his expression tense. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I heard what happened, he said quietly. Are you okay? I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I don't know, I admitted. But I can't stop now. He nodded, his eyes hard. Good. Because she's not going to stop either. I looked up at him, my throat tight. I know, I said. But I'm ready for her. Lucas put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and steady. Then let's finish this, he said. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. My father had trusted me to find the truth. And with Lucas by my side, I was done being afraid. I was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, no matter how deep Evelyn had buried it. The next morning dawned gray and heavy clouds, pressing down on the old house like a shroud. I woke up early, the chill of the night still clinging to the air. My father's documents lay stacked neatly on my desk, their presence a quiet reminder of everything that had been stolen and of everything I needed to fight for. Lucas had left late the night before, promising to be back after he checked in with a friend who might have more information about Evelyn's past dealings. His support was the only thing keeping me from feeling completely alone in this. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something enormous, something that could swallow me whole if I wasn't careful. I made my way back to the east wing, the heavy silence of the house pressing down on me with each step. The door creaked as I opened it, the faint smell of cedar and old books wrapping around me like a shroud. My father's study looked exactly as it had the night before, but today it felt different. It felt like the calm before a storm. I started with the desk again, pulling open every drawer, running my fingers along the wood grain, searching for anything I might have missed. My father had always said the truth was in the details, and I clung to those words like a prayer. The first few drawers were empty, filled only with old receipts and yellowed envelopes that crumbled at my touch. But then, in the bottom drawer, my fingers caught on something that didn't belong, a small groove carved into the back panel, almost invisible if you didn't know exactly what you were looking for. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed against it. With a soft click, the panel shifted, revealing a narrow, hidden compartment. My heart hammered in my chest as I reached inside my fingers, closing around a slim wooden box, worn smooth by years of careful handling. I pulled it out slowly, the weight of it grounding me in the moment. The box was simple, but the lock was solid brass, gleaming even in the dim light. I ran my thumb over the latch, my mind racing. My father had hidden this for a reason, and I needed to know why. I slipped the key from my pocket, the metal cold against my palm. It slid into the lock, easily turning, with a soft click that echoed in the silent room. The lid creaked as I lifted it, revealing a stack of neatly folded letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I pulled the bundle out carefully, the paper fragile and soft from age. The first letter was addressed to me in my father's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the words swimming in my vision. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, it means you found what I couldn't say aloud. Evelyn is not who she claims to be. She's taken things that don't belong to her, things that belong to you. I kept these letters hidden because I knew she would destroy them if she ever found them. They hold the proof of everything she's done, everything she's tried to keep from you. You must be careful, Harper. She will stop at nothing to protect her secrets. I trust you to do what's right. Love, Dad. My throat tightened as I read those words, tears stinging my eyes. I pressed the letter to my chest, letting the truth of it sink in. My father had known. He'd tried to warn me, even when he was gone. I unfolded the other letters slowly, each one a piece of the puzzle. There were receipts for transfers Evelyn had made, without my father's consent notes, about meetings she'd arranged behind his back, even a handwritten confession from a lawyer who'd helped her cover her tracks. The weight of the truth was staggering each letter, another nail in the coffin of her lies. I tucked the letters back into the box, my mind spinning. I had to get these to the lawyer. I had to make sure Evelyn couldn't bury them again. As I turned to leave, I heard it the softest scrape of a footstep just beyond the door. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding. I closed the box quickly, slipping it into my jacket as I stepped toward the doorway. Evelyn stood there, her expression unreadable, her arms crossed over her chest. "You found it, didn't you?" she said, her voice calm and smooth, like polished marble. I forced myself to meet her gaze. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I know everything now." A faint smile curved her lips. "Do you really?" she asked. "Or do you just think you do?" My fingers tightened around the box in my jacket. "I know enough to see what you've done," I said, "and I'm going to make sure everyone else sees it too." She took a step closer, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. "Be very careful, Harper," she said, her tone soft but her eyes hard as glass. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I'm not playing," I said, my voice low and fierce. "This isn't a game to me." She sighed, almost as if she were disappointed. "You're so much like him," she said quietly. "Always so certain you're right. But you don't understand the cost of the truth." I shook my head. "Maybe I don't," I said. But I'd rather live with the truth than spend another day living your lies. For a long moment, we just stood there, the silence between us as heavy as the air. Then she stepped back, her smile fading. Do what you think you have to do, she said. But remember, no one wins in a war like this. I watched her turn and walk away, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. My hands were still shaking, but I felt stronger than I had in days. The truth was in my hands now, and no matter how hard she tried to bury it, I wouldn't let it stay hidden. As I left the East Wing, the letters pressed close to my heart. I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Evelyn had played her hand, but now it was my turn, and I was ready to show her that the truth would always rise to the surface, no matter how deep she tried to bury it. I didn't waste a second. As soon as Evelyn's footsteps faded down the hall, I made my way out of the East Wing, the letters and documents secure inside my jacket. Every instinct in me screamed that I had to get them out of the house before she found a way to destroy them, because I knew she would try. I grabbed my phone and called Lucas. His voice was rough with sleep when he answered, but it sharpened instantly when he heard the urgency in mine. "Harper, what's wrong? I found more," I said in a low voice. "Letters proof. I'm taking them to the lawyer now." "Good," he said. "I'll meet you there. Just be careful, okay?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I will." The house was silent as I slipped out the back door, the weight of the wooden box under my arm grounding me in every step. The air was cold and damp, the sky still heavy with clouds. I moved quickly, my breath fogging in the chill morning air. I didn't let myself look back. The lawyer's office was a small brick building on the edge of town, the kind of place that had seen more secrets than any courtroom. I'd called ahead, so when I pushed through the door, David was already waiting. He was a friend of my father's, someone I knew I could trust. He took one look at my face and motioned me inside. "Harper," he said quietly. "Come on, let's see what you've got." I set the box down on his desk and opened it carefully, laying out the letters one by one. He read through them slowly, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. When he finally looked up at me, his expression was grave. "This is significant," he said. "If these documents are authentic, and from the looks of them, Evelyn doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." My shoulders sagged with relief. "So, what happens now?" David leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "We'll file a petition to reopen your father's estate. These letters and the amended will change everything. She can't keep the house, or the money if they're legitimate." I let out a shaky breath. "Thank you, David. I didn't know who else to turn to." He gave me a small smile. "You're doing the right thing, Harper. But you need to be prepared. Evelyn won't go down without a fight. People like her never do." "I know," I said softly. "I'm ready." He nodded. "I'll start drafting the paperwork right away. In the meantime, keep these safe. Don't let anyone else see them until I have them officially filed." I promised I would. As I stepped out of the office, the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But I also knew the battle was just beginning. I met up with Lucas in the parking lot. His eyes scanned my face as I approached, and he let out a breath. "You did it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yeah. David's taking care of it now." He grinned, relief and pride flickering across his face. "Good. You're braver than you think you know." I shook my head, though a smile tugged at my lips. "I don't feel brave," I said. "I feel exhausted." "Yeah," he said. "That's what fighting for the truth feels like." We sat in his car for a moment, the heater humming softly in the background. I watched the world outside the windshield, the sun breaking through the gray like a promise. But the quiet didn't last. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text. He frowned as he read it. "It's from a friend of mine," he said. "He works at the county clerk's office. He says Evelyn's been there all morning." My stomach tightened. "What is she doing? Probably trying to get ahead of you," he said. "But it's too late. You've already got the evidence." I nodded, but my mind was racing. Evelyn wouldn't give up easily. She'd already lied to my face. What would she do now that she knew I had proof? When I got back to the house that afternoon, The air felt charged like the moments before a storm breaks. I walked in through the front door and found Evelyn waiting in the foyer, her posture perfect and her expression serene. "You've been busy," she said, her voice calm. I met her gaze evenly. "I could say the same to you." She smiled faintly. "I've been clarifying some things," she said, "making sure the right people understand what's really going on here." I felt a flicker of fear, but I pushed it down. "You can't spin this, Evelyn," I said quietly. "I have the truth, and soon everyone else will too." For a moment, her smile wavered, but it didn't vanish. "The truth is a dangerous thing, Harper," she said. "It can tear families apart." I swallowed. Maybe it should. If the family is built on lies, it deserves to fall. Her eyes flashed, and I realized I'd finally gotten under her skin. "You think you're so righteous," she said, her voice low. "So sure you know what's best. But you're just a child playing with matches, and you're going to get burned." I stood my ground. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm willing to take that risk." She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. That night, I sat in my room, the letters spread out on the bed in front of me. I read them again and again, memorizing every word, every detail. My father's voice was in those pages, calm and steady, like he was standing beside me even now. I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I still had to fight for. The house, the inheritance, those were important, but they weren't the only things at stake. This was about honoring my father's memory, about proving that he hadn't been a fool for trusting me. I felt the weight of it in my chest, heavy but solid. I wasn't alone. I had Lucas. I had David. And I had the truth. As I turned off the lamp and lay back against the pillows, I knew that tomorrow would be harder. Evelyn would come at me with everything she had. But I was done being afraid. Because some things are worth fighting for, no matter how deep they've been buried. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. My heart was still thudding from the nightmares that had chased me through the night dreams of Evelyn's calm smile twisting into something far more sinister. I grabbed the phone, my hands still shaking. It was Lucas. His text was short and to the point. "Call me. Now." My stomach dropped. I dialed his number, and he picked up on the first ring. "Harper, are you okay?" His voice was tense, urgent. "I'm fine," I said. "What's going on?" "It's the documents," he said. "David's office was broken into last night. The safe was cleaned out, everything's gone." I felt the blood drain from my face. What? How? No one knows. The police think it was a professional job. No cameras, no alarms. Just gone. I pressed a hand to my mouth, my mind racing. "Evelyn," I whispered. "She's desperate," Lucas said. "And dangerous. You need to be careful." "I will," I said, though my voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I hung up and stared at the wall, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a stone. The letters, the will, everything my father had trusted me to protect, all gone in a single night. But not everything. I still had the copies I'd made hidden in a safe deposit box at the bank. It wasn't over. Not yet. I took a long, shaky breath and got dressed, pulling on a sweater and jeans, my movements automatic. My mind was already working, ticking through every possibility, every angle. Evelyn had made her move. Now it was my turn. I drove to the bank, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The safe deposit box was exactly where I'd left it, the copies safe and untouched. I tucked them into a new envelope, my name scrawled across the front in bold letters. Just seeing it there, solid and real, steadied me. As I left the bank, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Lucas, "Meet me at the old park. We need to talk." I drove there without thinking, the autumn wind whipping through the trees, sending leaves spiraling across the path like confetti. Lucas was waiting by the old fountain, his face tight with worry. "I'm glad you're here," he said as I approached. "We don't have much time." I handed him the envelope. "The copies," I said. "We're not beaten yet." He took it, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good," he said. "But we need to move fast. Evelyn's not just trying to protect herself anymore. She's trying to erase everything. She knows if she can make the evidence disappear, she wins." I nodded, the chill of the wind cutting through my sweater. Then we won't let her. We spent the afternoon going over every piece of evidence, every word in the letters, every signature and date. The more we looked, the more I saw the scope of Evelyn's betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, about control. She'd built a life on lies, and she wasn't going to let it crumble without a fight. At sunset, Lucas closed the last file and looked at me, his expression grim. "You know she'll come for you next," he said quietly. "I know," I said, "but I'm done running." He hesitated, then reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not alone, Harper. Whatever she tries, whatever happens, we're in this together." I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Thank you," I said, my voice catching in my throat. That night, back at the house, the air felt different. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside felt like a warning. I checked the locks twice, then 3 times, my pulse thundering in my ears. I was just about to turn in when I heard a soft click in the hallway, like the sound of a door closing. I froze, every nerve in my body going taut. I crept out of my room, my bare feet silent on the cold wood. The house was dark, the moonlight casting long shadows across the walls. I moved down the hallway slowly, my breath caught in my throat. I found the door to the study ajar, a sliver of light spilling out into the hall. I pushed it open carefully, my heart pounding. Evelyn was there, standing by the desk, her back to me. She was holding one of the copies of the will, one I'd thought I'd hidden well enough. My blood turned to ice. She turned when she heard me, her expression as calm as ever. "You're persistent," she said, her voice low and smooth. "I'll give you that." I stepped into the room, my hands clenched at my sides. "I'm not going to let you win," I said. A faint smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Winning is a matter of perspective," she said softly. "All I've ever done is what was necessary to keep this family, this house intact." "You're lying to yourself," I said. "You're not protecting anyone. You're destroying everything my father built." Her eyes flickered just for a moment, and I saw the crack in the mask, the fear she tried so hard to hide. "You think you're so noble," she said quietly. "But you don't know what it means to lose everything. You don't know what it means to be left with nothing." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I know what it means to have something worth fighting for. And I'm not going to let you take it from me." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us sharp as a blade. Then she set the will down on the desk, her expression cold. "Then I suppose we're at an impasse," she said. I met her gaze, my resolve like iron. "I suppose we are." When I finally went back to my room, the weight of what had just happened settled over me like a shroud. I knew Evelyn wasn't finished. She would try again. She would keep trying until she either won or lost everything. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind howl outside the window. My father's voice was in my mind, steady and calm. "The truth is always worth the fight." And in that moment, I knew I was ready to see this through to the end. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The stolen documents, the veiled threats, the cold, calculated calm of Evelyn's voice. It all pointed to one thing: she was going to make sure the truth never saw the light of day. And if I didn't act now, everything my father had tried to protect would be gone forever. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room, the faint glow of the moon spilling across the floorboards, my mind racing. Every instinct in me screamed that the answers I needed were still in this house, hidden somewhere beyond Evelyn's perfect smile and her carefully chosen words. I remembered the look in her eyes when she'd found me in the study, the flicker of fear she'd tried to hide. There was something she wasn't saying, something she didn't want me to find. And I was going to find it. At midnight, I slipped out of bed, every movement deliberate and silent. I dressed quickly, jeans, a dark sweater, and pulled my hair back in a tight knot. My fingers itched with adrenaline, my breath quick and shallow. I moved through the darkened house like a shadow, every creak of the floorboards magnified in the silence. I paused outside Evelyn's room, listening for any sound. Nothing. She was asleep or pretending to be. I made my way to the east wing, the brass key heavy in my pocket. My father's study loomed in the darkness, the air thick with the scent of old books and secrets. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. The desk was exactly as I'd left it, but I didn't waste time there. I moved to the bookcase on the far wall, my father's collection of first editions and leather-bound volumes. My father had always said, "If you want to hide something, put it where no one wants to look." I scanned the shelves, my fingers trailing over the spines. One book in particular caught my eye, a thick volume on maritime law that I remembered my father had always joked about. He'd said it was the most boring book in the world, no one would ever open it. I pulled it from the shelf, my breath catching as I felt the weight shift. I flipped it open, and there it was, a hollowed-out center, lined with velvet, and a small black notebook nestled inside. My fingers closed around it, my pulse thundering in my ears. I opened it carefully, the pages covered in my father's familiar handwriting. But these weren't letters or legal documents. These were notes, observations, records of every shady deal Evelyn had ever made, every lie she'd told, every threat she'd used to keep her control. I felt a surge of triumph and a flicker of terror. Because this was it. This was what she was so afraid of me finding. I tucked the notebook into my jacket and turned to leave. But as I reached for the door, I froze. A floorboard creaked behind me, a sound so soft it could have been the house settling, but I knew better. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her expression calm, but her eyes cold as winter. "You just don't know when to stop, do you?" she said softly. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the notebook in my pocket. "I'm not stopping until the truth is out." I said, my voice low but steady. She stepped into the room, the moonlight glinting off the silver locket at her throat. "You think you're doing the right thing," she said, her voice almost gentle. "But all you're doing is tearing apart everything your father tried to build." I shook my head. "No. He trusted me to finish what he started. And I'm going to." A flicker of something, anger, fear, desperation crossed her face. "You don't understand," she said. "If this gets out, it will destroy everything. The house, the estate, the family, it will all be gone." "Maybe it should be," I said. "If it's built on lies, it doesn't deserve to stand." Her lips thinned, her hands clenching at her sides. "You're so much like him," she said bitterly. "So sure of yourself. So sure you're right. But you're not. You're just a child who doesn't understand the cost of the truth." I took a step closer, my voice low and fierce. "Then explain it to me. Tell me what you're so afraid of losing." For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes glinting in the pale light. Then she let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "You want to know the cost," she said softly. "Fine. The cost is everything. Your father's reputation, this house, the people who depend on us. If you expose this, there will be nothing left but ashes." "Maybe that's the only way to start over," I said quietly. She looked at me, her expression shifting, a flicker of something almost like sadness in her eyes. "You really are your father's child," she said. "He never understood either." Then, with a small, cold smile, she turned and walked away, her footsteps soft in the dark. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence closed in around me like a shroud. I stood there for a long moment, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I slipped out of the study, the notebook clutched tight in my hand. I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to feel. I just moved my mind, focused on one thing, getting this out of the house, before Evelyn could take it from me. I slipped down the back stairs and out into the night, the cold air biting at my skin. I didn't care. The truth was in my hands, and I wasn't going to let it go. I knew this was only the beginning. Evelyn would come after me. She'd already proven she'd do whatever it took. But I was ready. My father's voice was in my head, calm and steady. "Never stop digging, Harper. The truth is worth it." And as I disappeared into the shadows of the night, the weight of the notebook heavy in my pocket, I knew he was right. I wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a blur of questions, of memories, of the cold glint in Evelyn's eyes as she tried to turn my father's legacy into her personal kingdom. But with the black notebook pressed against my chest, I felt a spark of something fierce and unbreakable resolve. By dawn, I had a plan. I met Lucas in the parking lot of an all-night diner on the edge of town. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but when he saw me, he managed a half smile. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, but I will be." He nodded understanding, without needing to ask more. "What's in the notebook?" he asked. Everything I said. The deals she made, the threats, the money she siphoned away. My father wrote it all down. He was building a case against her, even if he never said it out loud. Lucas let out a low whistle. "That's enough to end her." I nodded, gripping the notebook tighter. "It's not just about ending her, Lucas. It's about setting things right." My father didn't deserve to be remembered as a fool. He reached over and squeezed my hand. "So what's the next step? I'm going to make her tell the truth," I said. My voice was quiet, but it felt like steel. "She's been hiding behind half-truths and pretty words long enough. I want to hear her say it." Lucas's eyebrows shot up. "You're going to confront her?" Now I took a breath. "Yes, but I'm not going in blind. I want you there. I need you to hear it too." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's end this." We drove back to the house together, the morning sun turning the world gold and sharp. My hands were cold, but I didn't feel the chill. All I could think about was the truth, the way it pulsed under my skin like a second heartbeat. Evelyn was in the library when we walked in, standing by the tall windows with a cup of tea in her hand. She turned when she heard the door open, her expression serene as ever. "Harper," she said, her voice soft. "Lucas! To what do I owe this early visit? I didn't waste time." I pulled the black notebook from my jacket and held it out to her. "You know what this is?" I said. A flicker of something recognition, then something sharper crossed her face. She set the cup down carefully. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her tone still calm, but her fingers tightening on the handle of the cup. "In the study," I said. "Hidden behind your pretty lies." She let out a slow breath, her shoulders straightening. "So you know," she said quietly. I took a step closer. "I know enough," I said. "I know what you did, and I know my father trusted me to finish what he started." She studied me for a long moment, then looked at Lucas. "You're here to be her witness?" she asked. Lucas didn't flinch. "I'm here to make sure the truth finally gets told," he said. Evelyn's eyes flicked back to mine. "And what is it you think you want to hear from me, Harper?" she asked softly. "The truth," I said. "All of it." For a moment the silence was so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then she let out a quiet laugh, a sound without humor. "You think it's that simple," she said. "You think the truth is something you can just demand from someone?" "It's not a demand," I said. "It's a choice. And if you won't make it, I'll make sure the world sees what's in this notebook." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You're so much like him," she said again. "Stubborn, righteous, always so sure you're the one who can fix everything." "Then tell me why you did it," I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart was pounding. "Tell me why you spent years twisting his words, forging his name on documents he never agreed to." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned away from the window, her gaze far away. "Because he was going to leave me with nothing," she said finally. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "He was going to cut me out completely. After everything I'd done for him, for this family, he was going to cast me aside like I was nothing." I swallowed hard. "So you took it for yourself?" She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I took it because I had to. Because he never saw me as anything but a pretty ornament, someone to dress up the house and smile at parties. He never saw how hard I worked to keep everything from falling apart." "That's not an excuse," I said, my voice tight. "You stole from him. You stole from me." Her eyes met mine, cold and clear. "I did what I had to do," she said. "And I'd do it again if I had to." Lucas took a step forward. "So you're admitting it," he said. "You're admitting everything in that notebook is true." Evelyn looked at him, her chin lifting slightly. "Yes," she said. "Every word of it." I felt something inside me shift like a knot in my chest coming undone. I turned to Lucas, and he nodded, once his expression grim. "That's all we need," he said. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "You think you're so clever," she said softly, "but you don't understand what you're about to unleash. This family will never be the same after this." I shook my head. "Maybe that's the point," I said. "Maybe it's time to start over." For a moment, she looked at me like she wanted to argue to fight. But then she just sighed and turned away, her shoulders slumping. "Do what you have to do," she said. I walked out of the library, with Lucas by my side, the notebook clutched in my hand. My father's words were in my head, steady and calm. The truth will always find a way. And as the sun streamed through the windows, I finally believed it. Because no matter how hard she tried to bury it, no matter how deep she dug the lies, the truth was finally free. I walked out of the library, the black notebook pressed against my chest like a shield. My mind was a hurricane of thoughts and memories, each one laced with the weight of the truth Evelyn had finally admitted. I felt both numb and electrified, my hands trembling, as I gripped the worn leather cover. Lucas walked beside me in silence, his jaw-tight eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of Evelyn's next move. The morning light was harsh and cold, filtering through the tall windows and painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. We stepped into my father's study, the one room in this house that had always felt like mine as much as his. I set the notebook down on the desk, running my fingers over the cracked leather. My father's handwriting filled the pages like a whisper from the past, each word a thread pulling me deeper into the truth he'd tried so hard to leave for me. Lucas leaned over my shoulder. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him. "We don't have a choice," I said. "If we don't finish this, she'll keep twisting everything. She'll bury it all over again." He nodded once. "Then let's finish it." We spent the next hour going through every page of the notebook, cross-referencing it with the letters I'd hidden away, and the copies still locked up in the bank's safe deposit box. The web of lies Evelyn had spun was bigger and more tangled than I'd realized. Loans taken out in my father's name, secret transfers of money to shell accounts, even entire properties siphoned off through fake deeds and forged signatures. The deeper we went, the more I understood just how much she'd stolen, not just money and property, but pieces of my father's legacy, pieces of the life he'd tried to build for us. Lucas sat back in his chair, scrubbing a hand over his face. "This is enough to put her in prison," he said. "Or at least to make sure she never sets foot in this house again." I nodded, my throat tight. It's what she deserves. But as I traced my father's handwriting with my fingertips, I felt something else stir in my chest. Not anger, though there was plenty of that. Not even the cold satisfaction of finally having proof. What I felt was grief. Grief for the father I'd lost. Grief for the years he'd spent fighting battles I hadn't even known existed. I closed my eyes, breathing in the faint scent of old leather and cedar. "I wish he was here to see this," I said softly. Lucas reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "He is," he said, "in every word he wrote, in every step you've taken to finish what he started." I nodded, swallowing hard. "You're right," I said. "It's time." We took photos of every page, every line of my father's careful script. I scanned them into my laptop, backed them up on 3 different flash drives, and sent copies to David the lawyer. It was insurance protection against whatever Evelyn might try next. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that she wouldn't give up until she had no other choice. When we were done, I looked at Lucas. "I'm going to confront her," I said. "One last time." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Do you want me there?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted him there, wanted the strength of his presence at my back. But another part of me knew this was something I had to do alone. My father had trusted me to find the truth. Now it was time to show Evelyn that I wouldn't be afraid of her anymore. "I need to do this myself," I said quietly. Lucas's gaze softened. "Then I'll wait outside," he said. "But I'm not leaving until you're done." I found Evelyn in the sunroom, the bright light turning her blonde hair into a halo of gold. She was sipping tea, the picture of calm elegance, like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't cracked open under the weight of her lies. She looked up as I walked in her expression, unreadable. "Harper," she said softly, "you look resolved." I said, my voice even. I held up the notebook. "This is everything. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. And it's going to end today." She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You think you're strong enough to do what he couldn't?" she asked. "I don't have to be strong," I said. "I just have to be honest." Her eyes flickered, a shadow crossing her face. "You have no idea what you're doing," she said. "If you take this public, if you let everyone see it, won't just ruin me. It'll destroy this family. Everything your father worked for will be gone." I stepped closer, the words spilling out like a wave I couldn't stop. "You already destroyed it, Evelyn. You destroyed it the moment you decided you were entitled to everything he built. The moment you decided your comfort was more important than his wishes." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she set her teacup down carefully, her hands trembling just slightly. "He never understood," she said quietly. "He never saw how hard it was for me, how much I gave up to keep this house together." "You didn't keep it together," I said. "You turned it into a prison, and I'm done being your prisoner." Her lips parted, like she wanted to argue, to twist the truth into something she could live with. But I didn't give her the chance. "I've sent copies of this to David," I said. "To the bank, to the lawyer, to people you can't touch. If you try to come after me, it'll only prove everything in here is true." For the first time, her calm facade slipped. I saw the fear in her eyes, raw, bright, and human. She drew in a slow breath, her shoulders straightening. "So, this is it," she said softly. "You're going to tear it all down." "No," I said. "I'm going to build it back up, without you." I turned and walked out of the sunroom, the notebook clutched in my hands. My father's voice was in my mind again, calm and resolute. "The truth will always find a way." And I believed him, because I'd seen the truth with my own eyes. I'd held it in my hands, and I wasn't going to let anyone bury it again. I stepped out of the sunroom, the finality of my words still hanging in the air, like the last note of a song. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my mind was clear, like the first breath of fresh air after a storm. I walked back through the long hallway, past the portraits of ancestors who'd watched this house rise and fall for generations. Today, I'd put an end to the cycle of lies that had kept it in the dark for far too long. Lucas was waiting for me in the foyer, his expression tight with worry. "Did she fight you?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "She didn't have to," I said. "She knew. She always knew this was coming." He nodded, relief and resolve in his eyes. "What now?" he asked. "Now," I said, gripping the black notebook in my hand. "Now we finish what my father started." We drove to David's office as the afternoon sun dipped low, turning the sky a deep, molten gold. The air felt electric, every breath charged with the weight of everything we were about to set in motion. David was waiting for us, the legal documents spread across his desk like a map to the future. He read through the notebook carefully, each page another nail in the coffin of Evelyn's schemes. "This is enough," he said quietly. "More than enough." "Then let's do it," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and signatures. Petitions to reopen the estate, statements of evidence, legal notices that would make it impossible for Evelyn to keep her secrets buried. With each form I signed, I felt something old and heavy break free inside me, like I was finally letting go of the fear that had kept me silent for so long. Through it all, Lucas was by my side, a steady presence I hadn't known I needed. Every time I faltered, every time I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me, he was there, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that I was stronger than I'd ever believed. The night before the final hearing, I walked through the house one last time. The walls seemed to echo with memories, my father's quiet laughter, the smell of his cologne in the halls, the warmth of his hand on my shoulder when I was small. I let those memories fill me up, let them steady my heart for what was coming. In the study, I paused by his old leather chair. I could almost see him there, pen in hand, head bent over the pages that would one day lead me here. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I hope I made you proud, Dad." The next morning, the hearing room was bright and cold, the air humming with tension. Evelyn was there, dressed in soft gray, her hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She looked calm, her face a mask of polite indifference. But her eyes, they were hard and flat, like a locked door. The judge listened carefully as David laid out the evidence, the forged documents, the siphoned funds, the letters and notes my father had left behind. Evelyn didn't speak, didn't protest. She sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as the truth she'd spent years burying was laid bare for everyone to see. When it was over, the judge turned to me. "Ms. Grant," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you have the right to claim your father's estate in full accordance with his final wishes." I swallowed my throat tight. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said quietly. I turned to look at Evelyn. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something like regret, or maybe just the faint, bitter taste of defeat. But she didn't say a word. She stood up slowly, her back straight, and walked out of the room without looking back. And just like that, it was over. I stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of years of secrets finally lifted from my shoulders. Lucas was waiting for me on the steps, his smile warm and real. "You did it," he said. I nodded, a smile breaking across my face. "We did it," I said. "It's over." He reached out and pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself believe it was true. That evening, I walked through the house one last time. The rooms felt different now, lighter somehow, like the ghosts had finally been laid to rest. I ended up in the garden, the sky above streaked with the soft pinks and blues of twilight. I could almost hear my father's voice in the rustle of the leaves, see his smile in the gentle sway of the flowers he'd planted with his own hands. I sat on the old stone bench and let the quiet wash over me, the peace I'd fought so hard for finally mine. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what comes next for me, or for this house, or for the memories that live in these walls. But I know one thing: I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to stand up for the truth, to claim what's mine, to build something new on the ashes of everything that came before. Because in the end, the truth is always worth fighting for. If you've ever felt trapped by someone else's lies, let this story be a reminder the truth is powerful and it's yours to claim. Don't ever let anyone steal that from you. Like, comment, and share if you believe in the power of the truth, and let's build a future where no secret can stay buried.